Hello and welcome back to The Big Stage, brought to you by Betting Expert, where we run through all of the games in the Premier League. This week focusing, of course, on Game Week 6, where our key matches are Chelsea against Man City, the North London derby, and also Monday night's football action between Crystal Palace and Brighton. To help me dissect the fixtures, present our best bets as well. Once again, I'm joined by Rory Jennings. Rory, welcome aboard once again to The Big Stage. I don't want to talk about last night's football, the Carabao Cup, of course, Villa and Chelsea, but how are you getting on? How did you enjoy last week's Premier League action?
Yeah, I loved it. I think it was a really good weekend. There was a lot of twists and turns. I mean, the talking point became Manchester United, didn't it? And I just can't understand. They're obviously very lucky, but the question that I think we need to answer is: are they good because they're lucky, or are they lucky because they're good? So they got out of jail massively. I mean, huge moment for De Gea, huge moment for Mark Noble, and that kind of set the tone. But City dropping points, Chelsea winning, Liverpool winning. It's blown wide open, isn't it?
Well, that's it. I mean, we'll pull up our picks from last week as well. I mean, it was pretty hard to predict some of these results. I mean, we looked at Wolves. We thought that was a pretty comfortable win. Other results were obviously surprising. Man City, we said, how many would they score? But they were kept to a clean sheet. But, I mean, how much confidence for you as a Chelsea fan do you take from that Man City draw against Southampton?
I think that Man City are now in the precipice of a disaster. I genuinely do. And I know that people use that term in football far too easily and far too readily. And I'm trying not to do that. But the reason I say they're at the precipice of a disaster isn't necessarily because of that result. That result's not good, but these things happen. It can be an anomaly. And if you just look at it in a vacuum, it's going to happen. You're going to draw games where you feel like you should win. The reason I think it's quite a bad moment for them is because of the way that they've handled this issue with Pep Guardiola coming out against the fans. The narrative is Pep Guardiola's begging fans to turn up to the games. 25,000 empty seats. It looked like there were more Wickham fans in the ground the other night than there were Man City. So when the fans and the manager go head to head like that, having had minimal experience of it as a Chelsea fan, but when I've experienced it, it almost always ends in a fairly poor season. And I think that everybody who's been involved in this issue for Man City have handled it really badly. I mean, Pep Guardiola, if we agree, Joe, that football is a business, which I think we probably do, Pep Guardiola is effectively saying, you, the consumer, must buy more of my product. And that is a business model that I have never heard before. Equally, I think it's fairly aggressive for the Man City fan group to say stick to management, and then the way that the club have handled it, surely in public, the way that you handle an issue like this, at least public facing, take the sting out of it, calm it, put the flames out. But Pep Guardiola's gone back and says he won't apologise. It seems to just be a never-ending issue. So I think City have a really pivotal few weeks coming up.
Well, surely, I mean, the result on the pitch as well didn't exactly go their way. I know they, of course, won in the Cup, but that Premier League draw against Southampton, I mean, first of all, we weren't predicting it, and it's not exactly the best advert for going to watch Man City if they can't even score against Southampton. But let's dive into this week's fixtures. Let's get into our focus game, the first one, the big one, Chelsea against Man City. So now, in this one, the odds are actually looking pretty close. Of course, both teams well capable of getting a result against any side. So this one should be a really entertaining game, at least. Of course, it's a repeat of the Champions League final. So, Rory, how much confidence, like I say before, will Chelsea have going into this one, especially after that win against Tottenham last week?
Huge levels of confidence. I think Chelsea have now beaten Man City 3 times in a row. We have beaten them 3 times in a row. Think of the significance of that. I think sometimes when we say statements like that, you say it and you move on and you kind of forget. 3 times in a row, Guardiola has been outdone by Thomas Tuchel. That is unbelievable, truly unbelievable. And I would say on each of those 3 occasions, Chelsea went into the game not as favourites. You went into the game in the Cup, went into the game in the Champions League, went into the game in the league not as favourites. This one, however, I still think City will probably be seen as being favourites. But the way I'm looking at it now is I am, for the first time in ages, for the first time since Antoine Sibierski was in their midfield, have I gone into a game against Man City where I've thought, you know what? Chelsea are going to win this game, and Chelsea should win this game.
No, I mean, looking at the odds, like so we suggested, they are pretty close. The implied odds, I mean, they suggest that it is actually going to be a pretty much 1-1 draw. So both teams to score looks like a pretty decent bet at this point. We've actually got a tip from our community for a 1-1 on the correct score market. That's available at 8-1. But Rory, I mean, how do you see this one going? Do you see it being a straightforward game for Chelsea? I mean, how do you think these two teams will match up?
I think we always have to. Anything I'm about to say now is always on a bed and built on a foundation of. I understand that Manchester City are truly glorious. I understand what Pep Guardiola has done at that club. I understand everything about how brilliant his achievements are. The Centurions, the domestic treble. I get it. However, I think Chelsea are going to win this game, and I think Chelsea are going to win it fairly convincingly. If you look at what happened the other day when City played Southampton, they had one shot on target, Joe. One shot on target, and that came in the 90th minute from Phil Foden. When you think about the way that Chelsea are so miserly at the back, Chelsea are so stingy, we give away nothing. You get anything you get against us, and if you get something, well done. You've earned it because we give you nothing for free. Absolutely nothing. And Thiago Silva has been a revelation. I've fallen in love with that man in a way that you just didn't think it were possible. And the way that we can threaten City, when you think about their vulnerabilities, everything that is good about Chelsea will be able to exploit what City are going to offer. And the fact that they're coming to Stamford Bridge is huge. The fact that they're coming to Stamford Bridge without a proper number 9 is significant. And the fact that we've got Romelu Lukaku is a game changer.
Now, one thing I also wanted to point out maybe for Chelsea is also the goalkeeper situation. So Mendy obviously missed out through injury. How confident are you with Kepa in between the sticks?
Not confident. But what I would say is that you have to judge people, and it'd be unfair for me to judge Kepa Arrizabalaga by the form that he demonstrated 18 months ago, wouldn't it? So the form that he's demonstrated when he's been given an opportunity this season has been brilliant. Thought he was superb against Tottenham. Obviously saving penalties the other day. So I am very interested to see how he can develop, because I think Chelsea are desperate for him to rediscover some of the form that he displayed in his first season in the league. He is an incredibly expensive goalkeeper. I think at one point I said something fairly reactionary, but I said it could possibly be the worst signing in Premier League history, because when you weigh it up, Joe, it was 70 million quid, a 6-year deal, not in the team. You know, in terms of all of the constraints that you judge these things on. Of course, there have been worse signings, but not many of the worst signings cost 70 million quid. But he's proved me wrong of late. And look, I prefer Mendy, and I thought that the injury to Mendy was so unlucky. Did you see what happened? He got injured, a goal kick in the last kick of the game at home to St. Petersburg, like a nothing moment, and he injured himself. So it's a real shame that happened. But if we'd had this conversation 6 weeks ago, Kepa Arrizabalaga at home against City, how does this end? I would have been fairly pessimistic. The way it stands now, whether it's Kepa or whether it's Mendy, I still think Chelsea are going to win.
Now, of course, a slight glimmer of hope for Man City would be that Kevin De Bruyne could be in the lineup. He should be. I think he played in midweek as well against Wickham. Now, he has scored 3 times against Chelsea in their last 3 outings. Just talk to us about him, how gutted you are that he's not a Chelsea player anymore. Would you have him back, given the squad you've got at the moment?
Do you know? It's very difficult. I think people like us often like to appear knowledgeable, but through the benefit of hindsight. I think people like to act like they always saw this coming or whatever. Whereas the reality is, I am open to admit this. I went to Swindon to watch Chelsea play in the League Cup. Chelsea won 2-0. A lad called Marco van Ginkel broke his leg, and Kevin De Bruyne had one of the worst games I've ever seen the midfielder have. It was, he was completely out of his depth playing away to Swindon. So when he was sold for what was very big money, for a man who had played virtually no football, he was sold for a fortune. It was a sensible move. I think it's so easy to say Chelsea shouldn't have sold him. And of course they shouldn't have done. But you can also understand why we did. It's similar to the Mo Salah situation. I do understand why it happened. Of course it's a shame. And there was a time when Kevin De Bruyne was the best midfielder in the world. However, injury issues are a real problem for him. Form therefore suffers, and the way that he has been playing, I know he was decent last season. Of course, he would contribute to Chelsea's team, but the way that Chelsea play, the way that Chelsea like to set up in the middle, I it's not that he wouldn't get in our team. It's just that we have a system that doesn't. It's not like we have a glaring hole in our midfield where we need a Kevin De Bruyne figure to come in. So overall, a couple of years ago, it felt like we'd really messed up. But you look at our midfield now, and we've moved on.
Well, speaking of, one thing I want to actually touch on as well is the squad depth. So before the season started, we saw Man City, we basically lined up almost 2 11s that could easily have won the league. But if you'd actually look at the stats, Man City have had 9 different goal scorers so far this season, while Chelsea have had 10 different goal scorers. So does that point to Chelsea actually having more strength in depth than Man City, or how do you see that playing out?
I still think Man City have the most, the most brilliant squad. I don't think any squad competes to the Man City squad. When you look at the people that don't get anywhere near their first team, they would pretty much start for every other club in the world. I think that they have an abundance of riches on the bench, as do Chelsea, but just not to the same level. I think Chelsea. I think you could make a case for Manchester United, Man City, or Chelsea having or even Liverpool having the best first 11. You could make a case for any of them without looking foolish. But I just don't think anybody quite comes close to City for depth. The other thing I would say about City is, particularly when we compare them to all of the others, I would say that City have more match winners in their team than probably any other team in world football. I would say half a dozen within the starting 11 are recognised match winners. Whereas if you look at the Chelsea team, Chelsea have, in terms of who realistically are match winners, I would go Mason Mount can win you a game, Kai Havertz can win you a game, Romelu Lukaku can win you a game. Then it's unlikely. Mateo Kovacic is a brilliant player, but he's unlikely to be a match winner. Whereas when you look at the City squad and you look at even if you look at their starting 11, I would say 6 of the 11 are recognised match winners. If you look at even Gundogan, a player who shouldn't be a match winner, really, he's not what he's there to do. He was the best player in the world.
Their top goal scorer last season, right?
Exactly. That's exactly the point, Joe. Exactly.
Now, one player you did actually point to there with regards to Chelsea is Kovacic. He's been someone that's maybe a little bit been under the radar, but for me, I think he's been one of the standout players for Chelsea. For you, how important has he been to your start so far?
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's a truly brilliant player. I've called a lot wrong in football, and I hold my hands up with the amount I got wrong. But this is one that I got spot on. He is. I mean, I remember a time not that long ago where Chelsea fans were desperate for Kovacic not to start because he was stunting the progress of Ross Barkley. I mean, those days feel like a long way back, but that was genuinely a concern of Chelsea fans at one point, or some Chelsea fans. That is now not the case. Like, Mateo Kovacic is actually a Rolls Royce of a midfielder, so silky on the ball, pure silk, in fact. And I love him. I love everything about him as well. I love the way he conducts himself off the pitch. I share his love of red wine. I think he looks glorious in white trousers and boat shoes. I can't speak highly enough of the man. I adore him.
All right, well, let's get into our predictions for the game. Myself, I'm actually going to follow that community prediction of 1-1. But Rory, give us your score prediction for Chelsea against Man City.
You're not going to like this one, Joe. I think it's going to be seen as being far too bold and potentially labelled arrogant, but I think it's going to be a bit of a whooping. I think Chelsea are going to beat City 3-0.
Let's go for that then. Let's note that down in our little scrapbook. And then also, by the way, you can follow Rory's tips over on the Betting Expert website, over on his profile. That is linked below. But let's move on to the rest of the games, starting off with Man United against Villa. So the early kickoff on Saturday alongside Chelsea Man City is Man United against Aston Villa. Now, for me as a Villa fan, this is a fixture that basically I don't want to see. We haven't won in 17 tries against Man United. This looks like, according to the bookies odds as well, it should be another comfortable home win for Man United. Rory, we did speak in the intro about the luck maybe that Man United had, but how do you see this one going? I think you're not seeing it as a straightforward affair for United, right?
No, not at all. I think that Villa are a really tough opposition for Manchester United, and probably not. It's just not the dream, is it? Playing Villa in this circumstance for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is really not ideal, because it's the kind of fixture where he should win. Everybody will be saying he must win. It's not that easy to get everyone up for it. He's not playing City, he's not playing Liverpool, so he's really going to have to raise the troops after what happened against West Ham, and it's not going to be easy. Like in this circumstance, Liverpool or whatever his team would be up for, Brentford or one of the teams that are easier, lower down the league, Norwich, it would be a walkover. So Villa are a very difficult proposition for Solskjaer. And when you look at what happened to them in the week, when you look at how lucky they were against West Ham in the league towards the end of last week, it does make you think that there is a real banana skin here, and the jeopardy involved, I think, is huge for Solskjaer, because I think if this one goes wrong, people will really start asking questions. I think the result where they beat West Ham, the Jesse Lingard winner, that papered over the cracks. The cracks were there for all to see, the Lanzini winner, and a Villa win. And Villa are just on the up, on the crest of a wave. Huge win for them the other day against Everton. If this goes wrong for United, all of a sudden people are really asking questions about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because for the first time in Solskjaer's tenure, there is nobody else to blame. There is nobody else to blame. You can't pinpoint the squad. You can't pinpoint the lack of investment. You can't pinpoint anything. The only thing you can pinpoint is the dude in the dugout.
Absolutely. Now, for me, I am actually going to favour Man United in this one. It pains me to say it, but
You can't.
do think
United. That's unacceptable. You can't do that.
I know, but
that is
head over heart. Head over heart. I mean, I want to win our picks competition as well. So United are the odds-on favourites. I'm going to go for United. And also our community top bet as well, it is for there to be over 2.25 goals. Now, how that bet works, basically your bet is split into two. So if there are 2 goals in the game, you'll get half your stake back. And if there's more than 2, then the bet will be a winner. Now we're going to move on to the next game. So we did touch a little bit about on Everton a second ago. We're going to look at Everton against Norwich. So, of course, Everton did get whooped by Villa last time out, Rory. But how do you think they're going to bounce back after that defeat?
I think they're very fortunate that they're playing Norwich. I think when anyone's playing Norwich, my immediate conclusion is that they will win the game. I think Norwich are on course to do a Swindon or a Derby, aren't they? I think they are terrible. They are truly terrible, and it's pretty much a waste of time. So I think Everton win this, but I think Everton are also very fortunate that they're playing this fixture, because if they had a slightly more difficult fixture, I think it could be problematic. The nature of the defeat against Aston Villa will be being scrutinised by the Evertonians. They'll be looking at Benitez intently. So I think they've got out of jail here, because if it was anyone else, I would be saying that Everton could be up against it. But Norwich, they'll make light work.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm going for a 3-0 win. Rory, I think you're going the same way. So Everton to win that one, I think that's pretty straightforward. I know we said that last week about Man City against Southampton, but we can be confident about Everton winning this one. So we're going to move on now to the next game on our list. Is Leeds against West Ham. Now, Leeds did go ahead in the Friday night fixture against Newcastle, but were pegged back. West Ham, of course, felt undone by Mark Noble's late penalty miss. But Rory, how do you see this one going? Again, is it another kind of must-win for both sides?
I think it's difficult. I mean, I rate West Ham so highly now. I think West Ham are so good. And when you think about what David Moyes has done there, it's borderline unfathomable, isn't it? When he took over, when he came back to take that job, the lack of inspiration in West Ham fans' eyes about his appointment, the lack of invigoration and enthusiasm, it was palpable. And at the beginning of last season, West Ham fans were telling me that they were going to go down. All of a sudden, they're winning games in Europe. They are knocking Manchester United out of domestic cup competitions. They are a serious force. And it's got to the stage now where I can't ever write West Ham off.
I mean, if you actually look, I've got one stat for you as well with regards to Leeds. They've actually conceded the most shots on target, more than any other side in the Premier League, well, apart from Newcastle and Norwich. So really, for me, this looks like a really good opportunity for West Ham to get at Leeds, go out and get a result. Antonio as well is back after his red card. So for me, again, he should be the difference maker. West Ham minus half a goal looks like our top community bet for this one. And I myself am going for a West Ham win. But Rory, what are your predictions for this one?
I agree with you. I think Leeds could be in a little bit of trouble as well. It's just not going. It's not going well for them at all. And so many of their players who we know aren't good enough to play in the Premier League, but manage to look good enough. I mean, Liam Cooper's a good example. really being found out this year. So I think that it will be a tight game. Ellen Road's never easy, but I think West Ham will end up winning this one 2-1.
Fair enough. Good shout. Let's hope that is a winner as well. Now let's move on to the next game. We're going to look at Leicester against Burnley. Now for me, I've pegged Burnley as potential relegation candidates. I don't think they just offer much in terms of free-flowing football. I don't particularly enjoy watching their games either. Leicester, on the other hand, have had a bit of a roller coaster start. They've won some, they've lost some as well. Not really looked convincing at all, but they are the odds-on favourites to get the 3 points against Burnley. I'm going for a Leicester win here, but Rory, take us through it. How do you see this match playing out?
I think this one ends a draw. I've gone for a 1-1 here, Joe. I think that Leicester are starting to display the form that I suggested they would for a long time, which is that Brendan Rodgers is a decent manager, but ultimately there's a ceiling. I feel like they've hit their ceiling last year and they're struggling now. Their form has been really bad, really bad. And when you think about some of the stick that Mikel Arteta has got this year, they got the same points as Leicester. And yet, the narrative around the clubs is very different. So I think that Sean Dyche is a top-class manager. I really do. I rate him very highly. Obviously, his squad isn't quite as gifted, and therefore, I think they'll nullify one another. I think the brilliance of Dyche will nullify some of the players at Brendan Rodgers' disposal, and therefore finishes 1-1.
Good stuff. Well, like I say, I'm going for a Leicester win in this one. But let's move on to Watford Newcastle. Of course, Watford get a great win last week, winning 3-1. Newcastle, that Friday night draw against Leeds. Maybe they might have a little bit of confidence off the back of that result as well. They did go behind, of course. But Rory, how do you see this game shaping up?
It's such a difficult one to call. I mean, Newcastle are an enigma, aren't they? I just can't understand what's going on at that club. I mean, Steve Bruce looks totally out of his depth. Realistically, they should be relegation fodder. But there are certain players in their squad that will keep them up. And I think it's games like this, playing at Vicarage Road, where the likes of Alan St. Maximin can flourish. And I think that almost in spite of their manager, Newcastle will win this one 2-1.
I've gone the complete opposite. I think Watford will win. I feel like that performance they did put in last week looked really impressive. I know Sarr was on the score sheet twice, so I do pick him out. Even if you're looking at fantasy football as well, potentially get him in your team. Our community bet for this one is Watford -1/4 as well. So again, that kind of splits your bet. If it is a draw, then you get half of your stake back. If Watford win, then the whole bet is a winner. Now we're going to move on to another really big game involving one of the top teams in the league, Liverpool. Now, an interesting stat as well with regards to Liverpool and Chelsea. Actually, they're actually the first teams to match each other in terms of scoreline after 5 games in the Premier League. Quite incredible. I don't think we're going to see the same scoreline between Brentford and Liverpool as we will in the Chelsea-Man City game, but you never know. But Rory, take us through this one. I mean, is it just going to be a walkover for Liverpool, do you think?
Amazingly, I think we will see the same scoreline. I think Liverpool are going to make light work of Brentford. I think it finishes 3-0. And I still think that Chelsea are going to make light work of Man City. And I think that one finishes 3-0. There's going to be a new record, 6 games set, where Chelsea and Liverpool match one another in game weeks.
Would be incredible scenes. The correct score double, I think, would be pretty high on that one, to be honest. But our community bet for this one is Liverpool -1/4. So again, yeah, you basically need Liverpool to win by 2 clear goals for that one to be a winner. Myself as well, I'm going for a comfortable Liverpool win. So I think not much more to talk about with regards to that game. So let's move on to Sunday and the game between Southampton and Wolves. Now here, this one is a lot closer in the betting. Wolves coming off a disappointing result last time out. Southampton getting that amazing draw against Man City. They'll be really happy with that, of course. But Rory, I see you're going for a bit of a stalemate in this one. Talk us through these two.
I just don't think that either of them have enough quality, and I think that they will ultimately cancel each other out. I mean, Wolves just can't score goals, can they? Wolves just cannot score. They look so impotent. They've got no threat, no cutting edge, and I think that they could end up in a bit of a relegation fight. The fact that there are so many dodgy teams down there is probably going to do Wolves enough of a favour, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Wolves ended up in a relegation dogfight. With regard to Southampton, I find them fairly uninspiring. I think their manager is average at best. And I think this one ends 0-0. This has got the last match on Match of the Day written all over it.
Well, I mean, the one thing that we did point to in previous shows was Wolves' XG and how they are expected to score a lot of goals, but still can't find the net. But our community is going for Wolves on the draw no bet market. I myself, I'm going for Wolves as well. I'm going to put some kind of faith in that XG model. I know, Rory, you're not a huge fan of it, but I am going to go and back Wolves in this one. And now we're going to move on to our next feature game, the big one on Sunday, the North London Derby. So the North London Derby on Sunday. It's a massive game in London. Rory, talk us through, why is this such a big game? And yeah, I mean, how do you see this one going?
I think it's a big game to the fans of the clubs involved because they're both vying to be the second most relevant club in London. I think that's what they're doing. So it's a very important one because equally they want to be considered the second most relevant team from the capital. I think that it's also a huge game because whatever side loses this, like the jeopardy involved in this game is actually immense, isn't it? Because whatever club ends this one with a defeat, if any club loses this game, people are going to be calling for the manager's head almost immediately. I think Tottenham flattered to deceive massively early in the season. Those 3 consecutive 1-0 wins were so misleading. People telling you that Tottenham are top of the league. Of course they're not. There's no league table until a minimum of 5 games in. So Tottenham have now hit the kind of form that we expected them to hit. They've lost 2 London derbies in a row, 3-0. Look, it's not often I say this, but to be totally honest with you, I hope Arsenal make it 3-0 defeats for Tottenham in a row.
Now, to expand on your point there about how Tottenham have been so uninspiring in front of goal, they're actually the lowest ranked team in terms of expected goals, only 4.4, lowest in the league so far. Also an interesting stat about Harry Kane. He's not gone back-to-back games without scoring against Arsenal. But I mean, just talk to us about Harry Kane. I mean, what is going on there?
I think he's clearly a man desperate to not be playing football where he's playing football. I mean, what's going on around him is appalling, but equally, he needs to take responsibility for himself. I mean, I mentioned Alan St. Maximin earlier in this video, and Alan St. Maximin doesn't get the support that he needs. The players around him are shoddy and average at best. And yet, when the ball's at his feet, he makes something happen. So I think Harry Kane needs to do something similar. Harry Kane, despite the fact that he is lumbered in the most awful of Tottenham teams under one of the most average of Tottenham managers in recent memory, since Christian Gross, this is probably the least decent manager. You've got to remember, this is 9th choice Nuno they've got in charge. This is Mourinho without the charm. And they somehow are relying on Kane to pull them up the league table. And I don't know how up for it he is anymore. I think that summer that he's just had may have drained him so much, both mentally and physically, that he is now looking around. He's aware that his legacy is in tatters because at one point he was going to be Tottenham's best ever player in the Premier League era, undoubtedly. He was going to have a statue made for him, I'm sure. Potentially even a stand named after him at that new ground. But they can't do that for him anymore, can they? The relationship that he has with that club is in tatters because he has admitted that he doesn't want to play for them. So people like me will always go, yeah, you love him and he hates you. He doesn't want to play for you. So I don't know what the answer is for Kane. I think a goal will go a long way to helping the rapport with the fans and help build the bridge. But I'm not sure he will ever get to that stage. And the irony will be, Daniel Levy might think pretty soon, I want to sell him. And the irony will be, if not enough people want to buy him, Harry Kane may be asking Daniel Levy for a new contract.
Yeah, could well be. Of course, he did score in midweek in the Carabao Cup. He took his goal pretty well against Wolves. But yeah, I mean, look at momentum. I mean, these two are actually, if you look at the results, they're actually flipped. So of course, Spurs won their first 3. Arsenal lost their first 3, but then Arsenal have won their last 2. Tottenham have lost their last 2. So momentum really is on the red side of North London at the moment. Arsenal are the favourites, having home advantage. Rory, you're going for an Arsenal win, right? I'm going for an Arsenal win as well in this one. But what kind of scoreline do you think will happen?
I think it'll be a tight game. I think it'll be a really tight game. But I think Arsenal will edge it 2-1.
I think I'm going on the same lines, actually. We do have a bet builder suggestion for this game as well. So we're going for both teams to score, yes, over 2.5 goals. And because it is the North London derby, hopefully it'll be a bit feisty and a bit more entertaining than other games. So we're going for over 4.5 cards, available at 3-1 at Bet365. But now we're going to move on to the other game, the other featured game. Lastly, on Monday night, the big derby between Crystal Palace and Brighton. Now, Rory, just take us through this one. Why do you think this one is actually so much of a derby? Can you tell us the history between these two?
I mean, it isn't a derby. Their fans will tell you it's a derby, but it isn't. There is no way, there is no definition of the term derby that allows that one to be referred to as a derby. However, do you know this fixture? It is quite an interesting one because, like, you know, when people talk about, they say the North London derby, that's the biggest one, or maybe Manchester United Liverpool, which is an intercity derby. Like, that's seen as being a really intense one. I think some of the smaller derbies around the country are actually the ones that really deserve recognition in terms of the antipathy from the fans to each other. I think this is one where it goes wild. I mean, the Palace fans, particularly when it's at Brighton, the Palace fans that go down there, they do go wild. And it's similar to, say, Southampton Portsmouth or Newcastle Sunderland. Like, these are almost the bigger ones because they go under the radar. Birmingham Villa, that's another one, like, really intense. So I look forward to it. I think it's exciting. Palace have a tendency to get a good result, don't they? Palace have a tendency. I think they played each other in the playoffs fairly recently as well, which was obviously like a really significant one. But the history of it, I mean, I think it stems from the Alan Mullery. It's Alan Mullery and Terry Venables way back in the day. I think it was in the 70s. There was an issue, but I think Alan Mullery is at the very genesis of the hatred between these two clubs, and it's birds, isn't it? It's seagulls versus eagles. Everyone knows who wins that one, but it is an interesting one. But I will have to do a bit of research, Joe, on the Alan Mullery issue.
Well, we'll bring that up next time, maybe just when we review our results. But here, Palace are actually the slight favourites. I think we're given the home advantage, but Brighton are in great form. I mean, last term, their XG numbers were crazy compared to what they actually went and did. So Brighton, I feel like for me, I'm going to continue that trend again and go for a Brighton win. But Rory, just talking about the game, how these two have been shaping up so far this season. Brighton obviously up really high up in the table, but how do you see this game going?
I've gone for a Brighton win as well. I think that when I saw Chelsea play against Crystal Palace, I didn't think they were especially good. I think they asked a lot of questions, but ultimately they didn't play that badly and got beat 3-0, which I think it's a slight worry. They then replicated that blueprint at Anfield, where they played fairly well and got beat 3-0. So I think that there is a vulnerability to this team. In the underbelly, it's just slightly weak. And I mean, when teams are fairly evenly matched in an intense game, often form will make the difference. So I've kind of just gone with form. I think it will be tight, but I've gone 2-1 Palace. 2-1 Brighton. Yeah,
I mean, just to expand on that as well, Crystal Palace have had the lowest number of shots on target so far as well, so Brighton shouldn't be troubled by them. However, they have actually converted a lot of those chances. So, yeah, one to be maybe a little bit wary of. But also, I mean, also for Palace, they do have Wilfried Zaha in their team, who they do rely on a lot as their talisman. He has scored in the last, 4 goals in his last few meetings against Brighton as well. So look out for him. But I do feel like I'm with you as well, Rory. I think Brighton should be too strong. Given the momentum they have, given the form they're in, they should get the win here. But let's bring up our picks for game week 6 in the Premier League, just to recap how we see this week going. So again, I'm going for a Chelsea-Man City draw. I'm hoping that you're right about the United Villa game, to be honest, Rory. But yeah, as you can see, there are our picks for the game week. Now, if you want to pick or post your own predictions to Betting Expert, of course, you can do that via the links below. But Rory, thanks a lot for joining us on the big stage once again. Good luck with your picks, and we'll speak to you again next week.
Cheers, Joe. Cheers, everyone.
And that wraps it up for this edition of The Big Stage. As I say, if you do want to post your own picks, head on over to bettingexpert.com. There are tips on plenty of games throughout the world, basically on any football match, any sport you can think of, any event. But get involved over on there. Thanks a lot for watching. And if you do place a bet, as always, please do gamble responsibly.